The first trailer for Star Wars Resistance was recently revealed, and it's getting some mixed reactions. As a fan who watched all of both Clone Wars and Rebels, I have to say that this trailer didn't really get me excited for Resistance. More so than its predecessors, Resistance looks like a show that is purely for kids. While this is disappointing for some of us, it's not necessarily a terrible thing. A lot of the cartoons that adults are nostalgic about were pretty simplistic stories aimed just at kids, so it feels a bit silly to get upset about the kids of today having shows like this that are just for them. However, as an adult who loves both animation and Star Wars, I can't help but feel a little disappointed that they don't seem to be attempting to push the craft and storytelling of television animation forward. Clone Wars felt ambitious, like they were attempting to tell epic, cinematic stories that would really enrich the Star Wars saga. Rebels maintained some of that, and had a lot of credibility from the fans who saw it as the successor to Clone Wars. While much of it didn't feel as mature as Clone Wars, the story held the promise of continuing some of its predecessors' story arcs and helping to bridge the trilogies. Resistance feels further down the spectrum toward fun little Saturday morning style adventures aimed at younger fans of the newer films. I don't want to jump to conclusions and write the show off before it even airs, but if this is the case, why is there this change in approach? It's worth noting that Clone Wars and Rebels creator Dave Filoni has stated that Resistance is a bit different in that he's not involved in the day-to-day of the project. He created it and set it in motion, but he's given it to other people to raise up. So it's not really a Dave Filoni show in the same way that the past two were. Based on his comments, I liken it to Joss Whedon's involvement in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be worse, but if you as a fan have come to trust Dave Filoni as a storyteller, you can't really carry that faith and trust over to this show because it's not really his work in the same way. I also think it's important to note the difference in the context in which the series is being made compared to the Clone Wars. Back in 2008, the Star Wars film saga had concluded, and there were no more movies on the horizon. Just books, the occasional video game, and plans for a TV series called Star Wars Underworld. It's fair to say that the Clone Wars was the biggest thing going on in Star Wars at that time, so it was meant to target both children and the adult hardcore fanbase. The show had a lot of freedom to take on some big stories as long as they fit within the Clone Wars timeframe and didn't mess with the canon. Fast forward 10 years and the world of Star Wars has changed in a way that I don't think anyone could have anticipated. There's not only the sequel trilogy, you got plans for apparently endless spin-off films, including entire spin-off film series from Rian Johnson and the creators of Game of Thrones. Plus there's a live-action show coming from Jon Favreau, ongoing comics from Marvel, and books set in the new canon. There's so much there, I can understand that they might be a little bit more targeted and narrow in their focus for some of these projects. I would break the Star Wars audience into three general groups. You've got the mainstream casual fans who really just watch the movies, you've got the young children who love it, and you've got the older hardcore fan base that tends to engage with a decent amount of material outside of the films. With so much out there that appeals to both the older mainstream and hardcore fans, there's really not as much pressure or need to cater an animated series to these groups, especially when you're not likely to get the mainstream viewers anyway. The other factor is that they likely want to save their bigger stories for the films and live-action show. If you're Disney and you know that you have an audience that's eager to learn about what happened between episodes 6 and 7, you're more inclined to put those stories in a spin-off movie or your live-action show than you are to put them in an animated series that most of your potential audience won't watch, regardless of how good it is. The movies and upcoming TV show are simply the more profitable options, since people have to pay to see the movies and subscribe to watch the TV series. Because of this, it's very possible that Star Wars animated series from this point forward will be less ambitious and tell stories of little consequence. For example, I think we'll be less likely to see something as significant as the final encounter between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul told in an animated series as opposed to a live-action story. However, I do think there's hope in the form of Clone Wars returning. If the viewership for the revival is strong, perhaps it'll show Disney that there is an audience for Star Wars animation in this mold. It's also important to remember that both Clone Wars and Rebels became better, more mature shows as they progressed. Perhaps Resistance will take us by surprise with a strong start and follow a similar trajectory of improvement. But even if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. We've got Clone Wars back, we've got multiple comics coming out each month, more movies, and a live-action show on the horizon. The adult hardcore fanbase hasn't been forgotten, and it's okay if this animated series isn't for us. That's about all I've got for this video, but let me know your thoughts on the topic. I'd love to get your opinions on Resistance and the state of Star Wars animation in general. Where do you think it should go? What kind of tone do you think it should take? What fan base do you think it needs to cater to? What segment of the fan base? Let me know in the comments, but thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please like, comment, subscribe, and tune in next time.